Once again, when I have a few minutes here, I'm going to spend some time musing upon the question of culture creation versus the question of, or the prospect for, authenticity, and the possibility, of course, of being roped in, even if you are authentic, even if you are your own man, even if you are doing your own thing. There still is a possibility of you getting roped in and becoming a part of something that is astroturfed, something that is an instance of culture creation. Culture creation in the sense of, it being artificially, like they say with the term astroturfed, artificially made rather than simply something that has developed over time on its own, with its own momentum. Uh, Culture creation is something that gets pushed. It's something that gets that they mean to incept in our minds. Remember the movie Inception? The whole idea of putting an idea in your mind, and then making you think it's your own idea. Somebody from the CIA, some spokesman from the CIA said that something along the lines of, this is not verbatim, but something along the lines of, if you want to propagandize people, you have to make them think that you're not propagandizing them at all, but rather you're simply getting them to think for themselves. And of course, that's the really insidious aspect of all forms of brainwashing. You know, this this sitting at a distance, this central deceit, this behaving as if you're a neutral party, a disinterested party, and then getting people to nevertheless go along with the ideas that you want to plant in their minds. I get that there's a skill to it. I get that there's that there could be said to be something clever about it, but it just seems like the central deceit of it is vexing, to say the least. That your brainwashers are the very ones who claim not to be brainwashing you, are the very ones who claim to be disinterestedly representing the objective truth. So I've talked a few times now about Stranger in a Strange Land, the novel by Robert Heinlein, science fiction writer that I enjoyed in my youth. Before he wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, which was published in 1961. Most of what he wrote was pulpy kind of sci-fi, written for boys. When it was written in the 40s and 50s, and it had a certain charm to it and a certain innocence to it. But I don't know if Robert Heinlein was ever an innocent per se. In any case, with Starship Troopers, which was published in 1960, and Stranger in a Strange Land, which was published in 1961, with that 1-2 punch, he showed himself to have developed into something new. And I believe, I think a couple things, both of these are true at the same time. I think that, he was somebody who had written these stories, which these novels, which had messages about society, about how society ought to be run, and they were both novels that could be considered preachy or didactic in certain ways. So I think he's representing himself. I think he's representing his own beliefs truly in both of these novels, and yet at the same time, I strongly suspect, particularly with Stranger in a Strange Land, I strongly suspect that this was an instance of culture creation. This was an instance of astroturfing where the culture is going to go. Like I think it was in 1960 or 61, they announced the creation of the birth control pill. And of course, it was lauded and it was given all kinds of press. I think Time Life had a full feature on it, and devoted a cover to it. Time Life is the deep state. The Time Life is the voice of our ruling class, and it's the slop that they want us to imbibe. It's the that's putting it crudely, but and it's I think it's done more in a more elegant style than that. Of course, it's top notch as far as if you ever look at old Time Life magazines, the photography is very well done. It's very slick. It's the writers are all talented, and so there's nothing crude about the operation at all, but it is an operation. They were pushing the birth control pill. They also pushed LSD. Isn't that interesting? LSD, which is supposed to be the counterculture, the drug of the counterculture, but it was actually the drug that the CIA invented, or I don't know if they invented it, but they basically introduced it to the world as we know it. They used it in their grisly MK Ultra experiments, which were employed both against witting and against unwitting people, some people who had no idea what was happening to them, some people who hadn't even volunteered to be experimented on, and so the same the same ruling authorities that told us the birth control pill is here, this will change everything, and boy, it sure did, didn't it? That was right around the early 60s, but it was still many years before hippies and the whole free love scene. It was even like before the Beatles, before the Beatles really broke. And when the Beatles first came out, they weren't hippies at all. They were just fun-loving lads, who had slightly longer hair, but not they didn't look like hippies. They wore suits and stuff, and they were they were basically harmless, not really. Not really preaching anything, not really a part of any scene. Of course, as the 60s wore on, that they did become a part of that whole scene. Were they dragged unwittingly into it? Did they have their integrity, but they just got swept up in what was going on? Maybe. I'm not. I don't. I know there are people out there who have ideas or notions about the Beatles, being birthed in a lab, or something, being Tavistock created, and having not having written any of their songs. I don't know whether that's true or not. But I do have a much stronger sense about Robert Heinlein, and Stranger in a Strange Land, because that book was written, uh, well before the hippies came about, years before the hippies came about. In 1961, nobody was talking the way that people talked in that book. Nobody was, nobody was believing the kind of things that were being preached by the hero of that, Valentine Michael Smith, of that book. And of course, later when it became the book of the counterculture, and Charles Manson loved the book and named his own son Valentine Michael Smith after the main character of the book Stranger in a Strange Land. After that all came to pass, they just said, "Oh wow, he was so prophetic. He anticipated all this." Well, maybe. Or maybe he was a part of it. He did have connections. He did. He was part of the he was part of the Laurel Canyon scene, discussed in the book, Weird Scenes in the Canyon. Robert Heinlein was there, along with all those hippie musicians that showed up. Well, a disparate group of musicians. Everybody from the Beach Boys to the Mamas and the Papas, the Eagles, the Byrds, lots of acts came out of that scene, and that's their connection, the connection of so many of those people, so many of those celebrities that were coined and minted, at very young ages, much like the Beatles were. But many of them couldn't play their instruments at all, and the Beach Boys too. I don't think I mentioned them, also a part of that scene. So there's definitely an artificiality to all of it. Not to all of it, but to the formation of it. Now, once something catches on, then you have people glomming onto it, and you have people saying, "Yeah, man, I dig it," and they go along with it. They go, they flock to San Francisco because the song told them all to go to San Francisco and wear flowers in their hair. So that's what they did. And then the so-called free love philosophy started up in earnest in the real world, but it was in fiction. It was in a book of fiction. Just Summer of Love was 1967. It was published in a work of fiction just 6 years prior, and then it became a reality. So, culture creation versus that authenticity. It's a tricky thing to navigate. I find myself wondering these days whether the movement that I was a part of, that I became a part of, the so-called alt-right scene, I wonder if it was something that was cooked up, something that was a largely astroturfed scene, that was meant to serve a certain purpose within the culture, and I did, become part of it. I never sacrificed any of my beliefs, or change any of my beliefs, or alter any of my beliefs, to be a part of it. to be a part of it, but nevertheless, I found myself, for a time I was my star rose. Now, it didn't rise very high. I don't claim to ever have been any kind of household name, but I think back in the heady days of the let us say 2009 through, say, 2013, 2014 or so, I was, I became a part of this scene, and it was a scene that was allowed to exist, or allowed to burst forth into the world. Now, once 2015 came around, 2016 came around, 2017 came around. Once around that time, it was like, okay, time to put the kibosh on this whole thing. And then, my name was stained because of for having these kinds of associations. It was guilt by association, and so that more or less sealed my fate since then. That's what happens. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of anything that I did. I'm not ashamed of anything that I wrote. But I do suspect that there might have been some artificiality to this whole scene. That's what I suspect now. If there's any message I would want to send here through this video, beware of mass movements. That doesn't mean that you should dismiss somebody who's affiliated with who's become part of a mass movement, because you don't know necessarily that they've sold their soul, or that they're one of these nefarious culture shapers, who wants to, quote unquote, nudge you in a certain direction while making you think that you're the one who did it. But also another phenomenon very interesting to observe, and something that I've also talked about recently, is related to everything else, the other things that I've spoken about. Just as with the creation of all the 60s hippie free love drug scene, just like, potentially anyway, with the creation of the alt-right scene, the promotion of modern art and the promotion of literature by the CIA, of certain types of literature by the CIA, in the early years of the Cold War, starting in the late 40s, going into the 50s. What's discussed by Frances Saunders in her book, The Cultural Cold War, in which I talked about in a prior video, in which I know Academic Agent has also recently made reference to, and I talked about the synchronicity of how he came to notice this book, which was written a long time ago, in the year 2000. Just around the same time that I started talking about it again myself. I had known about it before. I'd watched Frances Saunders' video because I remember, like I was saying before, I was remembering how she, I was remembering hearing about Gloria Steinem being a part of the CIA, being a CIA asset, and how, in a larger sense, one can see that much of feminism is, a product of culture creation. It suits the suits. Oh gosh, I'm so clever. I'm so punny. It suits the suits, you know. It, to it suits the corporate interest. It's the state and corporate interest to have uh, more people you can tax, and it suits the interest of the cultural shapers to erode the family. And that's what feminism did. Feminism, or and it's in part, not just it, but it in alliance with lots of other similar uh, uh, movements or phenomena that were happening at around the same time. It led to the destruction of the family. It led to, I mean, it went along with, it was part and parcel of free love and the erosion of sexual morality, and the mothers no longer being in the workplace, mothers no longer being at home because, and eventually, of course, they made it the people of the corporate types made changed the economy such that uh, it became much more difficult to support a family on one income. The only families that are able to do that are families that are quite well off nowadays. It used to be that it could be working class families that a man with a factory job could support his family um, on his factory job wages. But that's not the case anymore. God knows it's not. Um, but these, I know this is kind of wide ranging and seems a little rambling, but I'm talking about something, there is an underlying point that I'm making here. Just that, as I was saying a few minutes ago, when the CIA was promoting modern art, they were promoting Jackson Pollock and Nathan Rothko, and is his first name Nathan? I can't remember, but Rothko and other modern artists. This was the CIA. This was the CIA's brainchild, just like LSD. The CIA created the LSD scene, the drug scene, um, the tune in, tune out, or tune in, turn on, drop out notion that came from the CIA. Timothy Leary was probably a CIA asset. Ken Kesey was probably a CIA asset. But as well, they were promoting modern art. Now, part of it was to get leverage against the Soviets, who were just very dogmatic and saying all art just has to be socialist realism. So we're going to show that we're hip and cool, and that the West is about hepcats making non-representational pictures and all kinds of crazy kooky stuff, and the West is where it's at if you want to be free, if you want to do if you don't want to be shackled as an artist and made to do everything in a certain style. And they also promoted literature, and a lot of the literature that they promoted was good literature. But they came to promote Orwell, who died at around the time when all this was starting. Orwell, who would not have wanted to have anything to do with the CIA, I'm pretty sure. But after he died, and they had access to his works, they went full steam ahead, saying 1984 is only about communism. Well, it wasn't just written about communism, but all forms of modern tyranny and totalitarianism and the surveillance state generally. But that's how it goes. You write something or paint something, or you're some kind of you're a creative type, and what you're doing is maybe you're struggling or to find an audience, or maybe you're succeeding at reaching people, but one way or another, you will be amplified by the powers that be if it suits their interest to amplify you. And it feels good. It feels good to be amplified. I knew that for the short time that I was amplified, even though I was never amplified that much. But for the short time in which I, was sort of a name, I remember, thinking, feeling a sense of accomplishment, feeling like, oh, I'm reaching people. You want to be able to reach people if you're an artist of whatever kind. You don't want to just, most of the time, you don't want to just have your work just sit around on your shelf and not be seen by anybody but a few people. You want it to be exposed to the world, because you believe in what you're doing, and you believe that it should find an audience, and one just has to be careful. One just has to be really careful about maintaining one's independence, maintaining one's integrity, in the midst of this onslaught of mass movements and, instances of culture creation. And again, in the case of someone like Heinlein, I think he sold out. He may have always been part of. He may have never been. He may never have, had any compunction about selling out. It might have always been on the docket for him. It might have been always part of the plan for him. But it's crazy that people like him and others could be seen as, the counterculture. Like, oh, they're really shaking things up, and yeah, let's expose them to all kinds of media attention and broadcast. Let's broadcast these images of these people, and let's let their music play on all our radio stations, and let's have their movies be shown. The kind of actors and directors who were part of the Laurel Canyon scene. Let's expose all this to the world, but it's but it's a counterculture, right? This is, if you're against the establishment, this is what you want to be. Nudge, nudge. Grow your hair long. Take drugs. Join a commune. Leave your family and become a free love degenerate. That's how to rebel. We're telling you how to rebel. But we're going to pretend that we disapprove of you. We're going to pretend that this is anti-establishment. The establishment is not behind this. Oh, it's all part of the scam. It's all part of the game. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there. Let me know if you have any thoughts. Leave them below. Thanks for watching.